this paper lead to further anthropological problems. Some of these are being investigated by the author with the help of colleagues, but the field is so vast that a larger number of people getting interested in the same problems is always advantageous. And so, in the following pages, a few of these are indicated. We have seen how the kinship organization is influenced and strengthened by the caste system, and how both these conform to certain patterns found in wide geographical areas called linguistic regions. And yet, no linguistic region has the same kind of kinship pattern. No two castes possess identical relationship behavior, and no two families in a caste act in exactly the same way. A description can give but a generalized picture of a type of social conduct which is ever changing, and it is necessary to understand the variety and mode of the changes which are found in each linguistic region or in each caste to understand well the implications of a social structure. One must find out the degree of tolerance which a social structure possesses for deviations and aberrations, and also the devices like myths and make beliefs which are used in order to incorporate the deviations into what is felt to be the normal mode of behavior. The rigidity or the elasticity of a social structure may depend either on the nature of the particular social structure or on the whole cultural fabric of a society. A few examples will make this clear. In Maharashtra, some castes follow the northern type of kinship behavior as regards marriage, while the majority of castes allow the marriage of a man to his mother's brother's daughter. Among those castes which follow the northern pattern, a few cases of cross cousin marriages do occur very rarely. In such cases, the bride is given in adoption to a man who is in no way related to the groom. She then becomes technically his daughter and can then marry the man as he is no blood relation of hers in her new capacity. The legality of such a procedure is questionable, but it is resorted to create the necessary condition of a northern marriage, that the groom and the bride must not be blood relations. Divorce is not tolerated by the Brahmanic law books and has not the sanction of the priests. The Hindu law, codified by the English with the help of the Brahmin savants, also withholds recognition of divorce, and yet divorce is a firmly established social institution all over India in all castes except a few which consider themselves the top castes. Example, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, etc. Divorce is granted in the Indian law courts and also in the caste councils without recourse to the law courts, and yet all castes combine in a conspiracy which denies the existence of these feature of the marriage customs of the Hindus. This refusal to face facts is helped by certain linguistic devices. There are different words for the first marriage, that is, marriage of a virgin, and for the subsequent marriages, that is, the remarriage of a widow or a divorcee. When I made inquiries about the marriages of widows in a community, I always received an emphatic no as an answer. When I persisted and asked if a widow or a divorcee never made a new home, a reluctant affirmative came, followed by the explanation that that was no marriage. It was but a sagai in Hindi, kareva in Punjabi, natra in Gujarati, or pat in Marathi, according to the region of my inquiry. The refusal to accept the existence of divorce has very far reaching effects on kinship and caste organization. One of the first steps which a caste used to take in order to improve its standing in the caste hierarchy was to interdict divorce and and widow remarriage. Examples of deviating behavior and the attempts either to explain it away or to fix it in the social norm are also found in old literature. The best known example is of the marriage of Draupadi to the five Pandava brothers. Scores of verses have been written in explanation of this abnormal behavior on the part of the beloved heroes. The explanations resort to a story about the previous birth of Princess Draupadi and a boon given to her by a god after the following incident. When Arjuna came to his house with the newly won bride, he called out in jest to his mother, saying, "Mother, I have got arms as usual." The mother replied from within the door, "Son, enjoy it, all five of you together." Kunti's words could not be made ineffective, and so the princess was married to all five brothers. Here we have the device of a myth Here we have the device of myth to explain and justify deviating behavior. A king could marry as many girls as he chose, and it was the desire of many a pretty girl to please the king and enter his harem. He could capture the wives of his enemies, who were considered to be his lawful booty, but within his own kingdom he had to respect married women. Depriving a subject of his wife brought curses and unpopularity here and hell in the other world. The following Pali story is based on this norm of behavior and depicts an attempt to circumvent the social and religious injunction. King Pasanadi of Banaras was a good king. Once, while doing the round of a city, he saw a very beautiful woman in the poor quarters of the city and desired to possess her. After coming back to his palace, he gave directions to his minister to find out if the woman had a husband, Sassamika, or was without one, Assamika. The minister brought the information that she had a husband. The king could not possess her and so employed her husband and waited for an opportunity of finding fault in his services and then beheading him. This ruse did not succeed, and in the end, the king repented of his behavior. What are the circumstances which favor deviations? There may be a type of social structure which is more tolerant about deviations than another. There may also be certain outside factors, especially like culture contact, which may lead to numerous deviations. In Indian society, both these factors have been at work. The family in the majority of regions in India is an autonomous unit with its own gods, its own observances, its own economic organization, which is semi independent of other similar units. The caste, in its turn, is also a closed autonomous unit which has certain limited contacts with other similar units and which controls the behavior of families in certain respects. Different castes living in the same locality have different rules as regards marriage, have different hereditary occupations, and different gods. A family and a caste are social groups of a kind where the individuals are conscious of belonging to the group. A linguistic region is a kind of a group where people are generally not aware of the membership of a group, but this consciousness awakens the moment one comes into contact with other linguistic groups. Changes occur in the structure of all these groups, and there are, as we have seen, devices of accommodation. Sometimes, however, the changes or deviations may be so great that accommodation and reorientation within the framework of the old structure is not possible. It is interesting to study what happens in such cases. In the Ramayana is told the story of one Shambhuka who, though of a low caste, had the temerity to undertake a Brahmanic penance. The man was killed by Rama. This deed brought no glory to Rama, who himself felt the injustice of the act, and a gloss was put on the whole affair by recording that Shambhuka went straight to heaven as he had the great honor of being killed by the divine Rama. The other is a historical incident. In the early 13th century, there lived a man who, feeling that he had a call for seeking the highest reality, renounced the joys of the world, left his house and wife, and went to Banaras to study and meditate at the feet of a great sage. The sage learnt about the The sage learnt about the sorry plight of the wife of his disciple and bade him go back and start life as a householder. The man did as he was bid. He was execrated by his fellow townsmen who excommunicated him. According to the Hindu religion, when a man becomes a sannyasi after renouncing the world, he is as good as dead and he must never come back to his old life. A sannyasi had no family and no caste. Socially, he is non existent. He has no rights nor any duties. Four children, three boys and a girl, were born to this couple. Unable to face life, the husband and wife, in expiation of their sin, committed suicide by drowning themselves in a river. The orphaned children lived by begging and became famous as great spiritual leaders and poets. One of these, named Jnaneshwara, was worshipped in his own times, but none could marry or settle down to the normal life of a Hindu, as they were children of a sannyasi who had reverted back to the life of a householder. The first men from Bengal who went to England for study were all of them employed by the government and given very good salaries. They lived in luxury in Calcutta and, though excommunicated by their caste, could always find enough offers of marriage to secure a bride and could purchase pardon from the community by staging an expensive ceremony of purification by bribing the priests. All this was possible because of the independent means of livelihood secured to them by the foreign rulers. Some of them married European women. At first, the opposition to such marriages was great, but later such couples were taken into the caste after a purificatory ceremony. In Maharashtra, a Brahmin married a widow some 65 years ago. He was excommunicated by his village community. His parents and brothers and sisters could not eat in his house. But this man lived in Pune, was independent of his family in the village, and gradually, after years of estrangement, the society accepted him and his family. His sons could marry Brahmin girls, and the past hardships only served to enhance the present prestige of the man. He became the pioneer. His example was followed by others, and now Brahmin widows can marry without the fear of social ostracism as far as the bigger cities are concerned. In the same way, in Malabar, the relationship between the younger sons of the Nambudri Brahmin families and Nair women had no legal status as far as the Anambudri fathers were concerned. The children of such relationship could not inherit their father's property. Neither had their fathers, as younger sons, any property of their own. During the British rule, it became possible for these men to have means of livelihood independent of the ancestral joint family and so were in a position to establish independent patrilineal families. These and other educated Nair men agitated for legalization of the Nair Sambandham as a regular marriage in which the children could inherit the father's property. This reform also is on par with the reform movements in the other regions of India. The Hindu family organization had to be modified to accommodate this new change because it could not cut off the deviating members in the old way. The four children of the sannyasi, namely Nivritti, Jnanadeva, Sopana, and the girl Mukta, even after reaching unprecedented social eminence as poet saints, could not hope to lead normal lives as householders in the Hindu society of those times. Every one of them committed suicide by religious penance or samadhi. The children of a remarried widow in the early 20th century, on the other hand, could find mates in their own society, and she and her husband came to be respected as pioneers in social reform. Similarly, the people agitated for and obtained the legislation of Sambandham and became the pioneers of the modern reform movement in the Malabar region. This difference in the consequences is no doubt dependent on the change in social situation due to culture contact, but it became possible mainly because of the protection afforded to the deviators by a foreign political power, thus making the old mechanisms of social sanctions and social control ineffective. Under these circumstances, the old institutions of family, the caste, and even the region have been undergoing certain changes. These unfortunately remain mainly unexplored fields of anthropology in India. Some work has been done on culture contact and cultural accommodation of primitive societies, but the problem of the structural stability, the tolerance of a structure for aberrations and deviations, and the mechanisms of structural accommodation have not been studied satisfactorily. The contact with Muslims and Christians brought a new type of deviant behavior into the Indian society. That was of people giving up their religion to become Muslims and Christians. When a man became a Muslim or a Christian, that cut him off from his family as if he were dead, but it did not free his wife, who might have remained Hindu. Such a man also had no place in the caste, though he may go on doing the hereditary work of the caste. The Hindu society cut the losses and went on with what was left. In a more closely knit society with centralized organs of social control, it is possible that India may have offered greater resistance to the two new religions and perhaps succumbed in doing so. But by the process of eliminating the deviants as dead, it preserved its old structure to a considerable extent without having to make compromises. History tells of different individuals and castes repenting of conversion and wishing to come back to the fold only to find the door barred. This mode of organization and survival is very different from that found in more closely knit societies which are not compartmental but centrally organized. If one may draw an analogy, the Hindu society with its autonomous, semi-independent structures like the family, the caste, and the polytheistic religion has an organization compared to that of the worms, where each segment, though linked to the others, is yet semi-independent and possessed of or capable of creating organs needed for survival. When such a worm is cut, each cut section goes on living as a new organism. The cut in one segment does not jeopardize or irreparably maim the remaining body. Among other animals with a centrally organized structure of the body, each limb is unique and irreplaceable, and so even a small loss is felt by and reacted to by the whole organism. From a social and cultural point of view, both types of organizations have certain advantages and disadvantages, and the survival value of each type will depend on the types of dangers each has to face. The mechanism of survival for one type of society is an all out fight, for the other, it is non resistance, retreat, and a drawing in within itself during the period of stress and a gradual expansion during the period of ease. These mechanisms inherent in the social structure are, however, not efficient under certain circumstances. Two examples were given above of what happened in the case of deviation in the past. In the recent past, a new factor came into play. This was political rule by people of other cultures. The Muslims, after conversion, left the non converted part of the society to its own devices and it continued its lopsided, truncated existence as best as it could. Under the British, a more centralized political power was established which introduced certain laws common to the whole Indian society, which wanted an army of employees to carry on its administration and thus created opportunities of economic freedom for people who could then successfully defy the mandates of the family or the caste. The family was based on a locality and could not hope to survive in a village hostile to it, but the new rulers made it possible for deviant families or individuals to live well away from the native village. These people introduced deviations within the own structure without resorting to conversion, and the society could not cut them off and had to accommodate them. A few examples will make this clear. All these examples refer to what has been called the movement of social reform started by Indians since the inception of the British rule. These reforms consisted of such things as crossing the seas for education, eating food with Europeans and people of other castes, marriage of girls after puberty, sending girls to schools or establishing schools for girls, marriage of widows, etc. The first men who did these things all belonged to Bengal, the first Indian province to be firmly established under the British rule. The society punished the deviant behavior mercilessly, even when the people who initiated this behavior, like Sambuka or who were products of such a behavior, the four children of the sannyasi, had proved their worth and had been honored. Yet they had to suffer the consequences of their actions or the actions of their parents. While conceding the individual worth of the actors, the acts themselves were condemned outright. The actors themselves accepted the verdict of the society. These were humble people who bowed down to the verdict of society. What happened when the deviators were powerful people? The example of Draupadi has already been cited. There are many other examples in old literature of acts which went against the established norms of kinship behavior. The excuses, the explanations offered, and the judgment passed against these would repay study. A historical example of such behavior is that of King Bimbisara, who killed his aged parents to gain the throne. The act went unpunished, but it is recorded that after three or four such kings, the subjects decided to put an end to the patricidial line and killed the king and offered the throne to another. The changes considered above were of a type initiated by individuals. Ultimately, almost all the changes in a social structure are initiated by the deviating behavior of a single person, but there are certain changes which seem not to be initiated by the isolated action of individuals but by mass behavior. To take a concrete example, the mass transportation of people from the primitive tribes to the tea gardens of Assam and the life of the primitives there is a factor which one would expect would lead to profound changes in the family structure of the primitives, yet this has not been studied up to now. At a labor depot in Koraput in Orissa, I had a very interesting conversation with the man who selected the laborers and arranged for their transport to Assam. This gentleman had contact with the laborers for over 20 years. He told me of the different ways in which peoples of different tribes reacted to the environment of the tea gardens. Godavari forests had a passion for saving money. They did not even eat properly and sometimes brought back up to 2000 rupees in cash. He said he always wanted to know how that money, which would be an enormous fortune among the primitives, was spent. The money hoarding Koya, the spendthrift Bondo, and others typify certain attitudes which must be of great consequence to the social structure of these people, and the mass contact with labor organizations must have far reaching effects, but unfortunately, they have not been studied. The same situation is found in industrial cities like Bombay, where laborers are drawn from all over India. Thousands of people leave their small villages and live in individual families in surroundings which are entirely different from their traditional home life in the village. How this mass phenomenon has reacted on the kinship organization is worth a study. That a social organization changes is a platitude, but to try to trace the agency, the extent, and the mode of change and the rationalizations accompanying such changes are details whose study would lead to a better understanding of social structures themselves. The joint family provided economic and social security. The village where people spent all their lives was also the ultimate support of all the residents. The rise of industrial cities and the new opportunities of employment have resulted in a loosening of the bonds of the joint family and of the village community. Death of a man did not leave the children destitute because there was the joint family to care for the children and the widow. The author also remembers a time when the aged, the blind, the maimed of the poorer population in a village were fed and clothed by the village. In the West Coast village, a day in the week was set aside as the alms day, and each family had to distribute at least 4 seers, that is, 8 pounds of rice, among the beggars who came to the door. The author's grandmother knew each of the beggars by name. School-going boys of the poor were given food by turns at the houses of the better off Brahmin citizens. Though the latter privilege was reserved for the Brahmins, on all feast days and marriages and deaths there was food and sometimes clothing given to the poor. This local charity has almost vanished. The destitutes and the beggars flock to the cities and do not belong anywhere. The problem of juvenile delinquency and destitution is becoming grave and cannot be solved by establishing bigger and bigger institutions in the cities. The children must be re established in the locality from which they came, and the responsibility of looking after them and providing for them must be taken up by the community of the native town. In the same way, it is easier for a linguistic region to look after its destitutes. These unfortunates must be reinstated in a community. They must belong somewhere. In the institutions, children from different linguistic regions are brought together, and the only bond which unites them is destitution or crime. The joint family, which could look after its orphans, has almost vanished. The caste system, with all its terrible injustices, also gave a certain social security to its members, and the village combined certain aspects of the family and the caste. In the modern setup, the old institutions seem to be at variance with the present needs. Old inherited loyalties to the family and the caste lead to nepotism, which vitiates public life in modern India. To build up feelings of intense loyalty to free India as one nation is the supreme need of the present day, and it seems to be at variance with the autonomous entities like the family, the caste, the village, and the region. The old segmental life failed to build up a strong nation, and so one thinks of giving it up. But the old way of life had also certain valuable cultural traits which we must preserve. The refusal to take sides when nations are at war may be due to an inherited attitude which cannot see absolute ethical good in one idea, or which cannot understand why the God of one community is better than that of another. The keen perception of social alternatives, an awareness of diversity, a tolerance of the practices of others are attitudes which have grown in in the particular historical configuration we call the Indian society. And when we modify consciously or unconsciously the old structures, we also modify old attitudes, or maybe the change in the attitude leads to the modification of the old structures. The kinship organization described in this book presents us with two zones with different modes of marriages. Marriage rules are rules about mating which must have an effect on the genetical makeup of a family or caste. We saw that in the north, the rules of marriage lay down that brides should be brought from families which are not related by blood, that as far as possible one should not give a daughter into a family from which a girl is brought as bride, and that in one generation more than one bride should not be brought from the same family. All this would result in a continuous mixing of all the families in a caste, and in a big family, one would find marriage connections with a very large number of other families in the caste. Suppose there is a northern caste with 20 intermarrying Gotras. The chances are that in a family having the Gotra A, one can find marriage connections with all the other Gotras B, C, D, E, etc. The families in Gotra A will have received genes from all the other Gotras. Thus, the Gotra A should be a miniature of the whole caste. If for a blood group survey one took a sample from such a caste by choosing 10 individuals from each Gotra, that sample should be identical with another sample which would consist of all the members of one Gotra. Also, if there is free mating as the rules suggest, every Gotra should be equally representative of the whole caste. On the other hand, if we take a southern caste with exogamous clans and the southern marriage rules, we may have quite a different genetical constitution of the caste. The clan A will have brought in brides predominantly from clan B with a sprinkling of a few from clans C and D. A majority of clans would remain unrepresented if one wrote out the genealogy of a family belonging to clan A. The same would be the case of a family belonging to clan F or G or H. In spite of the caste being the endogamous unit for marriage, the full freedom of choice would not be actually exercised, and any one clan would have no marriage connections with a large number of other clans. A sample of one clan will include a sample of two or three more clans, but never of the whole caste. If one constituted a caste sample by taking 10 individuals of each clan, it would be different from samples constituted by taking all members of any single clan. One cannot foretell what the findings of such an investigation would be. One will have to take into account various possibilities as follows. Number one, a caste may have been a small intermarrying group which split into units which kept on the practice. Or number two, a caste starting as one intermarrying group split into many groups where intermarriage is practiced only among smaller groups within the caste so that it consists today of clusters of intermarrying groups. Or number three, families practicing intermarriage and forming a close group came in contact with other families and coalesced to form a caste whose members practiced certain common craft and helped one another but kept to its old marriage alliances. Or number four, it may happen that whatever the marriage rules are, the genetic material is so uniformly distributed that neither type of mating shows up in difference in the genetical structure of clans or gotras. It would be a lucky chance indeed if an investigation of the above sort were to help in the complete understanding of a social structure, but nevertheless, it is worthwhile trying it out, for no science worth the name must disdain the help which another science can offer it. In the same way, it is worth making a thorough investigation of the North and the South and the East, as also of the various castes as regards blood groups and other easily determinable physical characteristics. Culture is not a thing dependent on physical heredity, but ultimately a culture walks on two legs, and if it is found that social structures can be spatially mapped, the chances are that the people who have different cultures may also be belonging to two different ethnic groups, and a key may be obtained to the origin of these cultures. When we study social structures, we do not mix the study with speculations about races, but when such a study reveals a spatial pattern, it is legitimate to seek the aid of another science and see if anything of use to us emerges from its investigation. The greatest importance is the whole which is made up by the entire fabric of the social institutions, traditions, and mental habits, which goes under the name of a culture, and which is the foundation of the diverse personalities which one meets and which one is. A study of a single societal social structure necessarily involves references to the whole culture without, however, carrying out a full analysis of it. In this sense, each study is incomplete and is doomed to remain ever incomplete. End of the chapter. Core agenda. And okay, nothing else.